She was 23 years old. She had just started her second year teaching fourth grade at Lakeview Elementary in Carroll County, Maryland. On the evening of October 14, 1997, she drove home from a parent-teacher conference, parked her blue Honda Civic in the driveway of the house she rented with her younger sister, and walked inside to make dinner. That is not a story about a woman who went missing. That is a story about a predator who was hiding in the one place no one thought to look. And it would take 27 years, a cold case unit that didn't exist when the crime occurred, and a piece of evidence sitting in a cardboard box in a county evidence room to finally bring him into the light. But before we get to any of that, we have to go back to that October evening. Because to understand what was lost, you first have to understand who Diane Kellner was. Carroll County in 1997 had the feeling of a place that believed in its own safety. It sat in the rolling farmland northwest of Baltimore, far enough from the city to feel insulated from whatever happened there. The towns were small and close-knit, the kind of place where people left their doors unlocked until well after dark, and where the same families had run the same feed stores and diners for 3 and 4 generations. Westminster, the county seat, had a population of just over 14,000. It had a community pool that closed after Labor Day, a high school football team everyone followed on Friday nights, and a diner on Main Street called the Cornerstone, where the coffee was terrible and the pie was remarkable, and nobody seemed to mind either way. Diane Kellner had grown up 20 miles east in Reisterstown, but she had moved to Westminster 2 years earlier to take the teaching position at Lakeview, and had built something real there quickly. She was the kind of person who learned your order before you told her twice. Her colleagues at the school remembered her staying late on Tuesdays to run the after-school reading club she had started herself, a group of 12 kids who had trouble keeping up, who sat on the floor of her classroom with paperbacks and felt safe enough there to admit when they didn't understand something. Her mother, Sharon Kellner, would later say that Diane had known since the age of 9 that she was going to teach. She used to line up her stuffed animals, Sharon said, and give them homework. She drove a car that needed a new muffler. She made cinnamon rolls from scratch every Sunday. She had a sister named Paula who was her closest friend, and a golden retriever named Biscuit who slept at the foot of her bed. October in Carroll County smelled like wood smoke and turned leaves. The previous week had been the kind of warm that made everyone forget winter was coming. And then it broke, and the cold came in overnight and stayed. On the morning of October 14th, Diane had worn the rust-colored cardigan she bought at a yard sale the previous spring. Paula remembered that specifically, the cardigan, and the fact that Diane had been in a good mood, humming something in the kitchen while she packed her bag. She had a parent-teacher conference scheduled that evening, a meeting with 3 sets of parents, and she had told Paula she would be home by 8. She waved from the front porch as Paula drove away to her evening shift at the hospital. She was still waving when Paula turned the corner. That was the last time Paula Kellner ever saw her sister standing on 2 feet. At 8:22 p.m., Diane's Honda Civic pulled into the driveway. A neighbor across the street, Gordon Falk, was walking his dog and noticed the headlights. He noted it because the muffler made a sound he recognized. He told investigators later that he had waved in the general direction of the car, though he wasn't certain she had seen him. He turned up his street, walked another 20 minutes, and went inside. At 9:05 p.m., Paula Kellner returned home from the hospital, having left her shift early because she had developed a migraine. She noticed the porch light was off, which was unusual. Diane always left the porch light on for her. The front door was unlocked, which was not unusual, but the house was dark and quiet in a way that felt wrong before Paula could explain why. She called out. No answer. She walked through the kitchen. Nothing out of place. The burner on the stove had been turned on and then off again, and there was a pot on it with water that had been heated and then gone cold, as if someone had started something and then stopped. By 9:20 p.m., Paula was calling Diane's cell phone. It rang from somewhere in the house. She found it on the bedroom floor, near the foot of the bed, face down. By 9:35 p.m., Paula had called 911. The Carroll County Sheriff's Department responded within 12 minutes. The first deputy on scene, a young officer named Ben Haverford, noted the unlocked door, the phone on the floor, and the cold pot on the stove. He also noted something that would later appear in a footnote of the initial report and then effectively disappear. A window in the back hallway, the one that faced the narrow alley between Diane's house and the rental property next door, was unlatched. It showed no signs of forced entry. Haverford filed the notation. Nothing further was done with it. Diane Kellner was found the following morning in a wooded area off Route 32, approximately 4 miles from her home. She had been strangled. She was 23 years old. The cardigan she had worn that morning was never recovered. The lead detective assigned to the case was a 17-year veteran of the Carroll County Sheriff's Department named Frank Caruso. Caruso was the kind of investigator who took work home in the literal sense. His wife later described stacks of folders on the kitchen table, interview notes written on the back of grocery lists. He had worked homicides before, but Carroll County did not see many of them, and this one arrived with the full weight of a town that did not know how to absorb it. Within 48 hours, Caruso had conducted 14 interviews. Within a week, that number had grown to 41. The investigation moved quickly to focus on 2 men. The first was Marcus Terrell, a former boyfriend of Diane's who had been seen arguing with her outside the Cornerstone 3 weeks before her death. Terrell was interviewed twice, provided an alibi for the evening of October 14th. He had been at a birthday party for his brother in Towson, a fact confirmed by 11 witnesses and a Polaroid photograph of him cutting the birthday cake at 9:17 p.m. He was cleared. The second person of interest was a man named Roy Sanner, who had done some repair work on Diane's house the previous summer, and who, according to a neighbor, had come back unannounced on 2 occasions in September. Sanner had a prior arrest for trespassing from 1991, nothing more serious. Caruso interviewed him 3 times. His alibi for October 14th was less clean. He claimed to have been home alone watching television, but there was no physical evidence connecting him to the scene, and in March of 1998, with pressure mounting and leads thinning, Sanner faded from the active investigation. He would not re-enter the picture for a very long time. The Carroll County community organized a vigil for Diane the week after her death that drew more than 400 people to the parking lot of Lakeview Elementary. Her students, 4th graders who were 9 and 10 years old, stood with candles their parents helped them hold. The reading club kids were in the front row. Someone had placed a framed photograph of Diane on a table near the school's front entrance. The kind of school photograph with a blue gradient background, the kind everyone had taken in the fall. The photograph stayed there for 2 years. Paula Kellner was not well during those months. She had already lost sleep to the headaches that had gotten her home early the night Diane disappeared, and now she was losing it to something harder to name. She quit her hospital job in the spring of 1998. She moved back to Reisterstown to be near her parents. The house on Vine Street was rented out to a family with 3 young children, and Paula drove past it once the following October, on the 1-year mark, and did not drive past it again. By 1999, the investigation had been classified as inactive. Not closed. The Carroll County Sheriff's Department was careful about that word. Inactive. The case file had grown to 412 pages. The evidence collected from the scene and from Diane's home had been bagged, cataloged, and moved to a county storage facility. Detective Caruso requested twice over the next 3 years that the case be reviewed. Both requests were approved in principle. Nothing was scheduled. The years have a way of burying things that communities cannot bear to look at directly. By 2003, the young deputy who had noted the unlatched window was working in a different county. Detective Caruso retired in 2007, at 54, with a pension and a fishing boat he rarely used. The photograph of Diane Kellner came down from the wall at Lakeview Elementary when the school underwent renovations in 2009. The Cornerstone Diner closed in 2011. The Reading Club kids were in their early 20s by then, most of them scattered to colleges and apartments in other cities, carrying a piece of that October with them in a way they probably couldn't fully explain to anyone who hadn't been there. Sharon Kellner, Diane's mother, kept a box. It sat on the shelf above her desk in the house in Reisterstown, a shoebox originally, replaced with a larger cardboard box when the papers outgrew it. It held the case number, the primary detective's retired phone number, every newspaper clipping from every article that had ever mentioned Diane's name, and a list of dates, the dates Sharon had called the sheriff's department to ask about the status of the investigation. There were 47 entries on the list by 2018. The calls had slowed by then, not because Sharon had stopped caring, but because she had learned to navigate around the thing when she needed to function. "You don't get over it," she said in a 2019 interview with a local paper that ran a piece on unsolved cases in Carroll County. "You just learn where to walk so you don't fall in." Paula Kellner had, by 2020, become a registered nurse who specialized in trauma care at a hospital outside of Philadelphia. She was good at the work in the specific way that people are sometimes made good at something by what they have survived. She had a daughter named Diane, born in 2009. She had not stopped checking the Carroll County Sheriff's Department website on the anniversary of her sister's death. Every October 14th, every year, the same page, the same outdated entry, the same nothing. Every case on this channel represents weeks of digging through records, verifying facts, and piecing together real lives that deserved better. If you want us to keep uncovering the truth behind stories like this one, please take a second to like this video and subscribe. Drop a comment letting us know where in the world you're watching from. Your support is what makes this possible. Now let's get back to Diane. In the spring of 2022, Carroll County Sheriff's Department established what it formerly called the Cold Case Review Unit. 2 investigators and a civilian analyst assigned to work exclusively on cases that had been inactive for more than 10 years. The unit was created in part because of advances in forensic DNA technology that had, in the previous decade, reopened and resolved dozens of cases across Maryland. It was also created, several people inside the department quietly noted, because Sharon Kellner had submitted a formal petition to the county commission the previous fall, signed by over 3,000 residents. The 2 investigators assigned to the unit were Sergeant Renata Okonkwo and Detective James Mabry. Okonkwo had 19 years of experience and had previously worked in the state's Attorney General office. Mabry was younger, 34, and had specialized training in forensic genealogy, the process by which crime scene DNA is uploaded to public ancestry databases, the same websites where ordinary people trace their family history, and then use to identify unknown contributors by tracing their distant relatives. He had used the technique to help close 2 cases in Baltimore County before transferring to Carroll County. In September of 2022, Okonkwo and Mabry pulled the Diane Kellner evidence boxes from storage. There were 7 of them, They signed the chain of custody documentation, transported the boxes to their unit's office, and began working through them systematically. The process took 11 days. Most of what they found was consistent with what the original investigation had documented. But on the afternoon of the 9th day, Mabry lifted a sealed evidence bag from near the bottom of Box 4. A bag containing a single item that had been collected from the unlatched window in the back hallway of Diane's house on October 15, 1997. It was a partial fingerprint on the interior surface of the windowsill, lifted and preserved by the original forensic team and then submitted to the FBI. The FBI had run it in 1998 against their national fingerprint database. No match. The file noted the submission, noted the result, and moved on. Mabry photographed the bag and photographed the documentation. Then he sat for a long moment. The fingerprint database the FBI had used in 1998 had contained approximately 47 million records. The current database contained over 170 million. He filed the request to resubmit the print the following morning. The result came back on a Thursday in November. It came in an email at 7:14 a.m. Mabry was alone in the office. He read the name. Read it again. He called Okonkwo, who was at home with her coffee, and said only, "You need to come in." The name on the fingerprint match was Gary Allen Prentice. He was 61 years old. He had been employed in October of 1997 as a property manager for a residential rental company that managed, among its many Carroll County properties, the house next door to Diane Kellner's on Vine Street. He had been a neighbor, functionally, for the entirety of Diane's tenancy. He had never been interviewed. He had never appeared on any list generated by the original investigation. He had a fingerprint record because of an arrest in 1994, a domestic incident, charges eventually dropped, that had placed him in the system. That 1994 entry was in the 1998 database. But the partial print from Diane's windowsill had not been sufficient for a match at that time against that record. By 2022, improved software for partial fingerprint analysis had changed what constituted a match. The same print. The same database record. A different answer. Gary Prentice was living in Harford County by 2022, retired, with a record that showed 2 speeding tickets and a dismissed noise complaint. His neighbors described him as quiet and unremarkable. He kept his lawn mowed. He had a dog. He attended a community church most Sundays. Nobody had any reason to think twice about him. On January 18, 2023, Sergeant Okonkwo and Detective Mabry, accompanied by 2 deputies and a state's attorney investigator, arrived at Gary Prentice's house at 6:45 in the morning. He answered the door in a flannel shirt. He looked at the people standing on his porch and said nothing for several seconds. Then he said, "I figured one day." He was placed in handcuffs and walked to the car in view of 2 neighbors who had come outside to collect their morning papers. He did not resist. He did not say anything else. At the Carroll County Courthouse, where the arraignment was held 3 days later, the gallery held more people than it had seen in years. Sharon Kellner was in the front row. Paula Kellner was beside her, holding her hand. Prentice entered a not guilty plea, but the physical evidence, the fingerprint, combined with cell tower records from 1997 that investigators had found in a second review of the original file, records that had been collected but never cross-referenced against anyone in the area who wasn't already on the suspect list, was substantial. His defense attorneys filed several motions over the following months. None of them succeeded. In October of 2024, 27 years and 1 week after Diane Kellner's death, Gary Allen Prentice was convicted of first-degree murder in Carroll County Circuit Court. He was sentenced to life in prison. He will not be eligible for parole. There is a photograph of Diane Kellner that her mother keeps on the desk now, separate from the box. It was taken the previous spring, the spring before October 1997, at a birthday party for a colleague at Lakeview. Diane is standing in someone's backyard, laughing at something outside the frame, her hand raised slightly as if she is about to make a point. She is wearing a light jacket. She looks like someone in the middle of a conversation she was enjoying. She looks like someone who had places to be. Paula Kellner, speaking to a reporter after the verdict, said, "I used to think the worst part was not knowing. But I think the worst part was watching everyone else forget. We never forgot." She paused. We never forgot for one day. The Carroll County Cold Case Review Unit has since reopened 3 additional cases. 2 are currently under active investigation. Sharon Kellner's petition, the one with 3,000 signatures, was entered into the court record during sentencing as a statement of community impact. It was noted by the presiding judge. 27 years is a long time to carry a name, but a name carried does not disappear. It waits. And sometimes the only thing standing between silence and justice is a piece of evidence sitting in a cardboard box, and the people who believe it still means something. How much evidence do you think sits in storage facilities across this country, waiting for technology that already exists to finally be applied? What is your reaction to the fact that the fingerprint was in the original 1997 database, but the software of the time couldn't confirm the match? And what does this case tell us about what we owe families like the Kellners, the ones who never stopped calling, never stopped counting the years? Justice found Diane Kellner after 27 years. Stories like hers are why this channel exists. If you believe truth is worth pursuing no matter how long it takes, subscribe so you don't miss the next case. More solved cold cases are waiting for you in the description below. Thank you for watching.